Well, hello and welcome to another episode of A Photographic Life, and one in which a photographer takes on the Proust Questionnaire. This week it's Emily Garthwaite, who was born in 1993 and grew up in the UK. She took up photography as a teenager and intended to pursue painting at Central St Martin's, but found herself studying film and photography. After working in club and fashion photography, she completed a Master's of Arts in photojournalism and documentary photography at the University of Westminster in 2016. It was when she visited India for the first time to scatter her grandmother's ashes in Assam, where her grandmother grew up, that she decided to work within photojournalism. The photographs from her months of travel through India were exhibited at the University of York's Norman Ray Gallery in 2014 under the title Afterlife. And her image of an Asian elephant titled Chained to Tradition was a finalist in the 2015 Wildlife Photographer of the Year Awards in the photojournalism category. During the summer of 2015, Garthwaite worked with the Ratiu Family Charitable Foundation in Romania, where she documented the salt flats of Turda, publishing a photojournal in the magazine Suitcase. In 2017, the Iranian Arts Institute invited her to photograph the Arbaeen pilgrimage, the world's largest annual pilgrimage, which instigated the series Iraq Road to Arbaeen. I hope I'm saying that correctly. I probably aren't. But anyway, Garthwaite visited southern Iraq for the first time that October and returned in 2018 as the geopolitical landscape evolved. She co-directed her first feature-length documentary on the subject, alternatively titled 41 Days in Iraq on Arbaeen, or the 40th Day, which screened in 2018 at the Chehel Cheraga. Lots of difficult names for me this week. Anyway, International Festival in Tehran, as well as in Italy. That same year, she exhibited her photography series Iraq Road to Arbaeen and A Portrait of India. In 2019, she spent time in Dearborn, Michigan, capturing its local Muslim community, and was named in the Forbes 30 Under 30 list. In 2020, she founded the Women Translate service, and after the COVID-19 lockdown, she returned to Iraq, visiting the Zagros Mountains and Tigris River. At the former, she accompanied the Bakhtiari people on their Kutch migration. This was followed by 2 climate-driven trips down the Tigris. She exhibited a journey down the Tigris River at the Visa pour l'Image in Perpignan, where she won the 2023 ICRC Humanitarian Visa Award. And Tears of the Tigris was exhibited at the Leica Gallery, London. Her project, Light Between Mountains, received a CCFD Terre Solidaire grant, while her contributions to the Leon Macaron Naima essay, The Last of the Marsh Arabs, won her the 2022 Covering Climate Now Award for photography. In 2024, Save the Children commissioned her to photograph the Yazidi community in Iraq, 10 years on from the Yazidi genocide. She is a Leica ambassador and has walked over 1,500 kilometres across the Kurdistan region of Iraq. She continues to develop contemporary archives in partnership with the Kurdistan Centre for Arts and Culture. Well, I think that's enough of me totally and utterly mispronouncing language. Why don't we hear from Emily? Well, Emily, welcome to A Photographic Life.
Thank you so much for having me here.
It's an absolute pleasure. And you're going to take on the Marcel Proust Questionnaire. So let's see how we do, shall we?
Gosh, okay.
No, there is absolutely nothing to be nervous of. I'm going to ask a question that goes back to the beginning. What was your experience of school?
I actually really loved school. I went to a school that was very creative and friendships that still survive today. But I think the most important thing was my father putting me into after school activities. I was in the astronomy class. I think I was the only girl in there. And the same with anything that involved kind of gymnastics or just more tomboy exercises, basically. That's what I
Okay.
was put into.
So when did you start to notice photography?
I mean, I was always interested in photography. And then when I was 14 or 15, my mother got a camera. It was kind of my dad had a video camera, but my mother got a camera for Christmas. And later that summer, near where my parents lived, there was this huge forest fire, and it was about three miles long. I mean, I was devastated because I'd grown up in Australia. I was like, so Steve Irwin generation, obsessed with crocodiles and snakes, and at that point was had worked at a zoo in the reptile enclosures. And I mean, I used to email this guy called Gerardo Garcia just to ask him animal questions, and he looked after the reptiles. I mean, incredibly patient man. And and so when the forest fire happened, I was completely devastated. Like I was floored by it because I knew that all of these habitats that we had spent a lot of time looking at and counting and protecting or putting little shields over, or I knew that they were all on fire or had disappeared. And so I asked my mum, and I still to this day think it's so bizarre that it happened completely intuitively. I asked my mum if I could borrow her camera, and I'd used it that summer. We'd had a family trip. And I remember I'd taken portraits of people. And I remember my parents like commented on me being confident enough to approach strangers. I've always just been the child that ran off. So if you spoke to my parents, they'd just say the whole time, they'd say, "Where's Emily?" Just every time. As a child, we looked at VHS tapes like years ago, I remember, and they pan over and you'd hear my father saying, "Oh God, where's Emily?" And then they sort of zoom in, right in the distance. And I'd be there playing with God knows what. But my dad said, "I'll come with you and we'll go behind the fire line with the firefighters." And we drove up. And I remember it's on National Trust land. So we would never take a car there normally. It couldn't have felt more adventurous and wild. And it was just dad and I. If I remember, we had AC/DC playing in the car. He had like the rolling CD collection of like Iron Maiden or AC/DC, and that's our childhood. My dad's a drummer. And yeah, and I photographed behind the fire line, and I was completely overwhelmed by the fact that everything I'd grown up with had just burnt down. And then, even more bizarrely, I filed it to the local newspaper with captions. I mean, this is like no one had explained this to me. Fortunately, I didn't file an invoice, but I did get informed by a family friend. They said, "Is this your daughter? Is this your daughter's photographs?" And they were in the local newspaper. Um, and that was the first time that I got published as a photojournalist. And and then it just sort of continued from there. I was just very curious and nosy, and there were there's some fishing lakes that were near my parents where Bosnian war veterans would go fishing to help with PTSD. I used to just go down there and sit with them and ask them questions. I sort of had plans for what we would call a photo story. But first, I got a bit too distracted listening to their war stories and learning about what PTSD was. And there's a guy called Martin. I remember he was describing going to the supermarket and how scary it was when you turned the bend because you couldn't see what was coming around the corner. And I remember that was the first time I'd understood PTSD and what it was. It wasn't really talked about then. It was still a kind of new term. Yeah, so I mean, in general, I was just quite a weird kid, and
Well, that leads me
it's
on.
very uncommon.
That leads me on to my next question, which perhaps you've already answered, but maybe we can kind of hone down on it. What is your most marked characteristic?
My curiosity. One of my colleagues, I remember, said I asked so many little questions. He said he just responds to a lot of them with "because the sky's blue, Emily." That's it. It's just a blanket statement. Um, yeah, so I've always just been very curious, um, and I guess very independent. Yeah, I just as it's just even from a very early age, just sort of off doing my own thing.
Well, two very good
Um,
characteristics for a photographer, that's for sure. Two excellent qualities to have. Which living person do you most admire?
person I most admire. Currently, mm, currently my partner,
Okay.
especially as I grow the baby. He's been so amazing.
Well, that's a lovely
Um,
romantic response to the question.
and that's probably where I'm at this point
Okay.
before I have the baby.
Okay.
But professionally, I think you're asking me. Um,
Well, I just think
uh,
in life, obviously, I should say to our listeners, you are 7.5 months pregnant. So obviously, having a baby is at the forefront of your mind.
yes, shockingly. But in terms of like deep admiration, um, I mean Jane Arraf, the writer who I'm very fortunate to work alongside, Canadian Palestinian writer. Um, a lot of my admiration lies with writers. In all fairness, actually, um, I've I've always wanted to be a writer. It's just such a different way of moving through the world and observing it. And it's you only need a notebook. I sort of envy my colleagues when they're beside me and maybe they have like a dictaphone or something, but generally they have the lightest setup and
Well,
their observations.
you're foreshadowing all of my questions because the next question I was going to ask you was what art forms are important to you? But I presume you're going to answer writing.
No,
Okay.
painting.
Okay.
Yeah, I first got inspired to get into photography through painting. I went to the National Gallery, um, and I was completely and still go to visit it. Actually, there's a Leonardo da Vinci incomplete sort of sketch, which is the Virgin Mary and Child. I remember seeing that, and it was at that time. It's now got its own dedicated room, actually, which makes me think I was really on the money with this being a special piece. But back then, it was on a very, very crowded wall with a lot of other paintings. It was the only drawing that I really remember in the National Gallery. And I got incredibly into painting from around the age of 12, obsessed with painting. Photography just sort of came out of that. And then when I went to art college, it was to be a painter. But I was sort of siphoned into the photography and film department, so kicking and screaming. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, I'd always wanted to either be a painter or to be a potter. But I get complete sort of cringe about dry clay on my hands. You know, this is why I'm a photographer. It's completely precious. And then the painting, I just wasn't as good at painting. I could visualize worlds, but I couldn't quite ever get it down on that paper. Um, but I was able to observe worlds with a camera, and that felt like a much swifter way to get to where I wanted to get to.
What's your greatest fear?
Um, my greatest fear would, I mean, my greatest fears are probably like illness, the health of the people around me that I love. I do worry about that quite a lot, actually.
Okay.
And people's safety, especially when we're working on certain jobs, you know. But I am quite an optimist. I am quite an eternal optimist, stubbornly so. I think it's fared me well. I think it's quite a useful thing to have.
It is. I always describe myself as a optimistic realist.
Yes, I have a relentless optimism. I'm not entirely sure why, with the state of the world, but I think when you surround yourself with incredible people and very pure people, I've got very wonderful people around me. It's easy to feel that way, I think.
Okay, so what is your greatest extravagance?
France, I love gardening. And actually, I've been on the move for so long, I haven't really been able to do it. But any given moment, I will be buying plants, even if I'm settling somewhere for a short period of time. That and herbal medicine. My sort of hobby is herbal medicine and foraging. I did it a lot in Kurdistan and Iraq, and now in England I do the same. I read a lot about it, I buy a lot of books on it, I get nerdy on YouTube about it, and so those sort of combined, now the garden I'm growing is much more medicinal.
Well, that leads me rather nicely into, I think, my next question, which is, which talent would you most like to have?
Comedy. Yes, I'd love to make people endlessly laugh. And there's a few people in my life who I sort of jointly put them up there as the funniest people I know. Unfortunately, if you're deeply funny, you've also got to have the highs and the lows. And I'm very grateful that I get to experience their comedy, but I don't have to also experience what they go through internally. But they do it with such grace. But I'd love to have that wit, ability to just make people like fall on the ground crying with
What what
laughter.
what what would you get from that, do you think?
I don't know. I don't know. It's just I'm just a sort of slower, deeper person, and terrible at small talk. And I like to get absorbed in long conversations. I think there's something about the speed of comedy that um, I love being around. I sort of find it like a relief.
So there's sort of that thing that we all have, that we want to do the thing that we can't do, even if we're very good at doing something else.
Yes, yeah. I mean, I don't envy it. I don't really want it in myself. I just like being around it a lot.
Okay. So what do you most value in your friends?
Their loyalty and um, their ability to. I'm quite private, so I'd always like to know that when I speak to someone, it's between us. It's not being shared with everyone else. My mum knows that well as well. I don't know. I'm just deeply private, and I have a sort of. I keep everyone else's private information private and expect the same, and that's what I get from especially my closest girlfriends.
I hate to tell you, Emily, but this is going out across the world.
I know. There's that kind of duality, isn't it? Of like there are parts of yourself that feel so private, and yet certain spaces it doesn't feel as exposing because there's a choice. This is a choice I've made. Also, these things really scare me, and I think it's useful for me to do it, you know, to
So
just sort of,
this is a form of therapy.
yes, like a form of therapy. Yeah, well, they say you should do something that scares you every day. I think I've done quite well at that. So this
I
is
think
just
you
this is today's.
I think you have. Hopefully you're not finding this too scary. Um, which words or phrases do you most overuse?
Oh, really? I get that from my relative of mine. He's a psychotherapist, and she'll say that a lot. Oh, really? Um, Other than um, I use audacity a lot. The word audacity
How do
or
you fit that?
audacious.
How do you fit that into everyday
Well,
conversation?
my friend Mabel, she runs something called the Wogcast, and it's all around words and words that we're connected to. And she'd sort of encouraged in me to have like a word of the year or something to focus on. And last year, I focused on the word audacity to be a bit more audacious in my life. And this kind of encompassed all sorts of things. I made bolder decisions. I faced rejection in areas that I was worried about. I got familiar with it. And I think audaciousness is really important in this world. And I think it's quite easy to be sort of woe is me or self pitying. Throw in a bit of audacity, and suddenly you can make things happen. And you have to see that the people that make things happen have that quality. I mean, we have to nurture it in ourselves. So I've used that word a lot, and now it's sort of carried into 2026 as well. Um, and
You don't
it's
have a new word for the year.
I think it was well, I think we had discussed another word, but it was one of these. It was like a Japanese word. Now I can't remember it. So audacity continues.
So the key to word of the year is make sure it's one you can remember.
Yeah, yeah, it's key.
What do you consider your greatest achievement?
Um, my greatest achievement. I got an art scholarship when I was 13, and my teacher thought I was, she used to put me in detention quite a lot. And I wasn't good at art. I wanted to be a biologist. I wanted to be like Steve Irwin or work near Steve Irwin. Um, and so I sort of had all these dreams of either becoming like it was going to be a vet or, but it was science entirely. And so art was sort of roll your eyes. And so she used to keep me behind a detention. And whilst I was there, one of the girls was kind of spoken to by her and said, "You would be an amazing person to go for a scholarship because you're brilliant at art." And I thought, you know what would really wind her up is if I went for it as well to the teacher for a different school. And so I sort of quietly, without her knowing, um, started practicing and drawing um, because she'd always told me I was rubbish at art and I wouldn't be able to do it. And so I made it. I thought, well, okay, then I better start doing it to prove a point. I mean, she's the reason why I've got an art career. It's because she told me I wouldn't be any good at it. And so I did get the scholarship. And she was quite speechless. And I remember thinking, oh, that feels quite good, actually. And so that audacity and sort of slightly anarchist spirit remains. I think it's very important that when people tell you that you're not able to do something, you're not good enough, that you can rise to the challenge.
I find it so often the case in people's lives that something happens, either it's in their childhood or teenage years, which the person who does it to them is totally unaware of the importance of that thing. And that person then spends the rest of their life trying to prove them wrong.
Yeah.
I think it's a very common trait.
Yeah, I think it's brilliant. It's that watershed moment, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it can be, although sometimes we don't know it until many years later. If you were to die and to come back as a person or thing, what would it be? Or who would it be?
It would be Miriam Margolyes, probably.
Okay, why actor Miriam Margolyes?
I think she really doesn't care, does she? She's just absolutely living her life in the present moment. Um,
And she
or
was a comedian in the beginning as well.
yes, and Jane Goodall would be extraordinary. Um, and I would love to have lived Lee Miller's life, to have experienced what she experienced. That sort of multi-hyphenate woman capable of so many different careers um, and such kind of a wild life. Yeah, maybe I think I'd probably pick Lee Miller's, which would be difficult, complex, but it would be a life well lived.
I get the impression you're somebody who doesn't take the easy option.
Probably not, no.
uh, what is your greatest regret?
My greatest regret, which I'm now making up for, is being away so much. With the job, you miss you miss birthdays and weddings and sometimes funerals um, and it sort of sets you up as someone who isn't perhaps very dependable, despite in your nature being someone dependable. And so, what's nice about being settled somewhere more permanently is being available for people. I want to be contributing more consistently to my community, this ecosystem, whether it's my family or my friends. I want to be there. I want to be there to pick them up from the airport or on really difficult days. And so it's I don't really have regrets if I'm absolutely honest. I've never really reflected on things I regret in that way. But what I do know is there's desires for what I really want to see in the future, which I didn't have so much in the past.
And how does that impact on your photography, which has been so engaged with travel?
Well, I'm not actually that well traveled. I think people think I'm I'm very well traveled in a very specific place, going back to the same place. But the reason why I moved to Iraq was so that I didn't have to travel so much in a way. I thought I don't want to be coming backwards and forwards. I just want to stay here. So moving to Kurdistan was just a matter of practicality and not wanting to be jetting around the world. I haven't been to that many places, and I'm not particularly well travelled. but I do love slow travel and dedicating myself to one place. So now being in England, I'm very dedicated to the stories that are happening here. And that's been so exciting. I mean, the most exciting story to me is the one that's happening very, very nearby within, it's like there's something so exciting about knowing that it's just down the road. That life or that action, that story or that whatever's unfolding is just there. It's never really interested me that it's happening. I've had to go far away because then I know I have to come back. And actually, I'd rather just stay and stick around. One of the most frustrating things that people can say to you if you are sent for a sort of one-off assignment is, "Oh, I wish you were here, next week because this is happening," or "There's always something happening next week." And
Or last
the
week.
beat, or last week, yeah, gosh, you just arrived the night after. And that's what was so wonderful about being based in Iraq is I'd say, "Oh, well, I'll be there," you know,
What is your idea of perfect happiness?
in the garden, drinking coffee with my partner. Yeah, early, 6:30,
Okay.
Tweety birds.
Okay. And what is your motto? Do you have a motto for life?
I really liked. I remember who's the writer for Fleabag? Forgotten her name. She did this fabulous speech. She won a BAFTA, I think. And she
Oh,
said, "My
yeah.
mother, my Waller, Sophie Waller-Bridge. No,
Phoebe Waller-Bridge.
Phoebe Waller-Bridge."
Yeah.
And she did a speech at the BAFTAs. I absolutely loved it. And one of the things she said is, "My mother's in the room." And she said, "Whatever you do in this life, darling, be outrageous." And I thought that was fantastic advice. You can be whatever you want to be, just make sure you're outrageous.
Do you feel that's difficult being a woman photographer to be outrageous? Do you feel that there is a requirement of you or an expectation of you?
I mean, I remember spending like just chatting with my grandmother about the fact that I have a career and I work and how much how rewarding it was for her, and the same like chatting to my mom and her saying, "You've got this career and this is so exciting," and there's I'm sure there's ways I should behave. I'm sure there's ways that I should be, but I can only be myself, and let the work speak more loudly. Yeah, I'm sure there are expectations of what a woman should be, but I mean the strengths of being a woman photographer are extraordinary, and I mean it makes much more sense to be a woman and a photographer. It's certainly in the nature of the work that I do. I mean, you can't access half of the communities unless you're a woman, really. Um, it's my greatest strength as a photographer as being a woman, and there are frustrations, of course, but I don't really try to dwell on those. I just try to keep striking out, and maybe outrageous is not the word. It would be audacious, but it feels very important, yeah, to just continue. But I mean, it's important that to know that I've been taking pictures for nearly all my life, really. It's not, a lot of my friends came across photography or started in their 20s, or even later. So for me, I've sort of never ever known a world without it or without stories. I've always been pursuing stories or interested and curious. And I mean, I have actually literally just here because I've just moved. I mean, this is like, these must be my journals from, I don't know, like past 4 years. I mean, I write and write and write and write. I mean, it's all in there, all dull as ditch water, I'm sure.
I'm sure it isn't. Emily, you've done very well taking on the questions. I think we can confirm that you are a very strong-minded lady who is filled with adventure as well as a love for nature, as well as photography. So thank you very much for joining us this week.
It's very kind of you. Thank you.
Once again, thank you very much to Emily for contributing this week, and thank you for listening. And of course, over the coming week, take care.